Otherwise, it's just my thoughts and memories and yours, and but not wrapped together. Do you want me to share the screen of the script? Or are you good? Or like I
You had sent me some questions, I think, and I couldn't find those, and I was
okay.
scrambling to find.
Do you want me to do you want me to resend them or
Um, or I just wing it. You could, sure.
so no, it's Mark, this is easy stuff. This is like being back when I was working in the hospital. It's like, hey, there you go. What do you need? Well, I can send it to you 5 different ways from Sunday. There we go. Email attachment. Transmitting. Because I share this. Typically, I share the screen that I'm working with. But if you know, if that way, it's either in hand or
Right.
whatever works for you.
Okay. Let's see what we got here. Yeah.
How much of an outage was there in your area? Like, was it across
Who
Canada or
knows?
what?
Yeah, I don't know across the country. Yeah. Um, okay. I'm good.
You good? Okay.
Good.
There's no trick questions, and so the next. Do you want me to share the screen, or are you good? Otherwise,
I'm good. We don't need to share
yeah.
it. No.
No, it's for Wayne and I. It helps. If it hinders, I'm good not doing it. My second piece is I'm going to take my cell phone and make sure it is on a vibrate. There
Okay.
we go.
Yeah, maybe we'll do the same. Never get calls.
I remember one time there's a buddy was saying, "Oh yeah, I've silenced everything," and next thing you know, his email and it sounded like sonar going off, like he was getting emails during the podcast. Okay, a couple other just kind of do the checklist of stuff then. So the questions they're 1 to 20, and if there's something you want to focus more on, or we hit a question going, yeah, I don't want that part of this conversation. Not a problem. If you want to rephrase something and you've said something, let me do it this way. Not a problem. I'm the editor, so I listen to the whole thing over again, and then I just knock out the ums, the ahs, and that didn't come out right, and just zero it out. It is primarily an audio podcast. However, I will record video, so it'll go on YouTube, but its primary purpose is audio. Right
Okay.
now, we're experiencing about 5,000 downloads a week. Predominantly, the majority are in the US. So,
Just on that, uh, Kat Fleischman put me in touch with you and we said all this stuff. No, no, no. It was what's her name? Come on, from Canada. Uh, Sh Cheryl set us up.
yeah,
Kat Fleischman has been doing some other work for me. And recently I put some of the links to the YouTube videos that I've done with these other folks on my YouTube page. And I was surprised. 6 views, 8 views, 2 views, 100 views. Like a lot of these podcasters are not getting broad reach. And I thought, geez, I'm going to all this trouble. So if you're getting that number, that's a
yeah.
lot better than a lot of people.
Well, hang on, just to give you a kind of a proof of the mix. I'll share a screen with you, and so in the past, since Wayne and I have started this, we over from 2022 to about just before Christmas, we had just reached about 5,000 downloads aggregate, and right now, downloads in the last 7 days is that all-time downloads. So we switched platforms and we're working with another company. We've hit 51,000, and that 51,000 was generated as of March 18th, March 24th of this year. And yes, top country, US, etc. I don't mind doing the bragging piece. That's just,
You're doing a lot better than a lot of these folks. So
yeah. So
good on you.
and so some of these guys like, this one was released May 23rd, 181 downloads, right? So, so it gets a push out, like this ad hype one. I did this about 3 weeks ago. He's already at 1,400.
Wow. Well, good.
Yeah. So it's just to give you a sense of oomph. Yeah, when we first started this, we were on Buzzsprout originally, and all of a sudden I touched base with this company out of Israel, and they said, "Well, listen, we talked in at the end of November," and so he said, "Hey, let me demonstrate it to you." Then we were going to have a meeting in December, and his kid was sick. Then we postponed 2 weeks. My kid got sick, right? And all of a sudden, this hockey stick thing happened with all the hits. And going, geez, what did I do? And then we finally met in February, right? And the sorting hat said, this is why you're. And so like, okay, done. So cool. If you have a image for a thumbnail, only if you have one, and you don't have to have one. When I post on the podcast, there's usually a thumbnail that's with it.
Yep.
I can, if you have an image, I can bring that in. Just bear in mind, I have the Knack for Business logo, its season, episode, and title. That's part of it that I put on top of it. If you have nothing, it's totally okay.
So you mean a picture of me, right?
Well, yeah, I'll show you again with like kind of what's going out there. So you'll see on the share screen coming up. So you kind of get a sense of what's going on. It can be a picture of you. Let's go to episodes. Right. So like, for example, this one here, from dread to dull, it's just, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's another gentleman who I did. Like these are obviously in the AI spectrum. There's another one. Someone had a specific program, and so he had this. So I just the logo by itself wasn't that appealing, or it kind of nice, but how do I situate it, but at the same time have a landscape to it or a view of it, right? And so yeah. The idea is just to catch the eye, and then it's actually the content that's getting pushed out that's going to make the rock the world. What else to tell you? How's my sound level?
Sounds good to me.
Good. Yep. And do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay, so here we go. Knack for Business, Season 3, Episode E149. And it is not the 21st. Do that quick edit. May 29, 2025. Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Today's topic is why time feels slippery. Your hosts are Bernie Franzgrote from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc. So what can you expect from the Knack for Business podcast? Well, the aim is to help you find your feet in the business world, whether you're just starting out or you've been at it for a while. We have something for everyone. In each episode, they dive deep into a particular area of business and explore the ins and outs of that subject. They interview guests that are experts in their field who share their success stories and their experiences. They offer practical tips and advice. Question for the audience: why are you spending most of your day on the wrong things, and how do you fix it? That's exactly what Mark will be talking about. How to help you and your team focus more time on what actually matters most in your business. If you're ready to stop wasting time and start working smarter, tune into this episode and hear how time studies are helping business owners, consultants, and teams reclaim an hour a day for high impact work. Our guest today is Mark Ellwoood from Get More Done. Mark is Mark from Get More Done. So Mark from Get More Done, an internationally recognized productivity consultant and founder of the Pace Productivity. He helps organizations and their people focus on what matters most, guiding them to gain back an hour a day for top priority work using his proprietary Timecorder time study system. As a strategic facilitator and trainer, he brings creativity, humor, and deep listening to every session, making planning and performance uh, making planning and performance improvement practical and engaging. Mark's mission? Well, it's to give teams the tools and insights they need to get more done. And when he's not transforming workplace habits, he's writing poetry, practicing piano, and planning to join a band starting in November 2037, just a few years off. Mark, it's an absolute pleasure having you here today. Welcome, sir. And do you have a favorite quote or saying?
It's a delight to be here. A favorite quote was from Indiana Jones, and in the first movie, he was in all kinds of peril. And the woman said, Indy, Indy, what are you going to do next? He goes, I don't know. I'm just making it up as I go.
I like that one. I seem to recall that one. Yeah. In business, I've heard it explained that time is money. And how do people waste their money in essence, or their time in essence?
People talk about all the time. Oh, what a waste. Ah, we're wasting time. And a little while back, I thought, let's parse that. Let's try and understand what do we really mean by wasted time? So if you kind of examine it in detail, you could start with the employee who is running his own business through on company time. That's waste. That's stealing time, in fact. You could have employees who are not well trained. So they're spending a lot more time on an activity that they should because they don't know how to do it properly. Maybe that employee is getting different directions in terms of what he or she is supposed to be doing. So one day it's this or another day it's that. So some wasted time there. Interestingly, what I found is one of the biggest time wasters not comes from the employees themselves, but from others. That is their boss who keeps changing directions on them, from the other department who didn't provide the right kind of information or insights that the employee needs. Well, of course, everybody's blaming everyone else's department, but that's certainly where a lot of time waste happens. It's not the individual who might be perhaps procrastinating. So there's another bit of time waste there, but rather it's others in the organization. And so we have to think about how we interact with other teams, because that's where some of the time waste comes from.
So
I'll
would
give
that
you one
be,
example, quick example.
yeah, go ahead.
So I've measured unnecessary emails, right? Uh, I'm receiving all these emails, and we've measured this with a number of clients tracking their time with our time quarter devices. And email is great. It's a terrific communication tool, but it can also get abused. And so the average amount of time that knowledge workers were spending on unnecessary email, separate from all the useful emails, unnecessary email was 3.4 hours per week. That's massive. That's what they considered to be wasted time. Now, maybe the person sending the email didn't think it was unnecessary, but certainly the receiver did. And so it's that other department, other people sending these unnecessary emails that contributes to what could be called a waste of time.
I saw an article as you're describing the email. I saw an article, and this particular, I think it was a pharmaceutical firm, and the person was saying, "Listen, they push out an email, and all of a sudden they're getting an echo back. Everybody's responding to it, and they thought, well, they're losing time, and they actually put a little acronym right at the top of the on the subject line: no need to respond. It's FYI only." And so that way you didn't have an echo coming back of either opinions that that's nice, bring it up at the next management meeting or put it on a list, etc.
Oh, I've raised that a number of times. You send somebody something that they requested and they write back, thanks. And I don't know if I've got a consensus on this. A lot of people say you don't need to thank me. And if you're going to thank someone, say thank you for going out of your way and staying late. That thing made a real difference, and here's the impact. Is going like give people a reason that you're thanking them. And there's a kind of a formula for doing that. But just to say thanks. A lot of people think is unnecessary. Others say, well, I wasn't sure if it got through and so on. The consensus seemed to be leaning towards no, you don't need to thank people. We're all polite. We're all helping each other out here. And if you want to signal somebody out, then you can do that in a very particular way, but not just by saying thanks.
Just want to continue a bit more on the email piece. One of the things I find sometimes, especially if you're trying to go through your emails fast and you get a small window. So if you don't open the entire email up, right, you see the top maybe 5 or 6 lines. And then all of a sudden, buried about halfway down the pipe is, but what you're not looking at is, yeah, it's a kind of a critical piece of information. This is all wonderful. And then there's a but, and then, or do something else, right? And you totally miss it. It's happened to me so many times. So is format, and I guess this goes to the bigger picture. And you also mentioned it earlier. What is the proper process? Without being too constructive, but what's the proper process so that if you're communicating, you're going to do something, you're going to host a meeting, that it becomes, this is a good use of time.
Well, in your question was a bit of the answer. You said that 5 or 6 lines, and that's halfway down. If you've got an email that's 10 or 15 lines, that's probably too long. So what's going on in there? You're probably telling stories. Okay, last week you asked me for this particular thing and you wanted it by Friday, but I was away, so I got it, sent it to you Monday, but you were on and on and on, big long stories. And so don't use emails to tell stories. Don't use emails to correct people. I wanted you to do this and I asked you for it by that time and you said you were going to do it, but you didn't. Oh my gosh, it goes on and on and on. Look, there may be good reasons. I have the famous, his mother died. That's what happened. That's why they didn't get back to you. But if you're telling long stories, if you're trying to correct behavior, if you're trying to convince somebody of something, that's not a good use of email. There are formulas for convincing. When I started at Procter & Gamble, we had the one-page reco or recommendation, and it followed a format. Here's our objective, here's our strategy, here's what we recommend, here's why. So that might make some sense, but you can do that in an attachment. Trying to convince people is tough through email. So I would say avoid those uses of email and keep it short. Can you meet tomorrow morning to go over the budget plan? That's all you need. I received your report and I have 3 questions about it, and here they are. So don't use it for those other long reasons because you'll get caught up in writing and rewriting. If you find yourself rewriting an email to try and be really precise and not step on someone's toes, that's the wrong medium. Pick up the phone and call them. Arrange a meeting, have a Zoom meeting, whatever might be needed, but email is probably the wrong medium for that.
So you said about 20% of time is spent on top priorities. First off, is there a problem gauging what a top priority is? Is everything a top priority? Like, how do you rank something to be important? I mean, if your house is on fire, get out. That's, numero uno. I get that piece. But if you have, things that are, they're all roughly equal import, right? I got to go to lunch. Got to make sure the kids get off to school. If it's a household piece, to the office space. Okay, we got to plan the Christmas party. Got to do, book up 4 months ahead of time. But at the same time, we got to get a report. How do you all of a sudden, they're all important, but
Allow me to take a couple of minutes to explain that. Some people might be familiar with the so-called Eisenhower matrix. Stephen Covey talked about that, and other time management experts have. So it wasn't invented by Eisenhower, but he quoted a university dean who had talked about this idea of urgent and important activities. And you create a little 2x2 grid with urgent and important but not urgent, and so on. And so what Covey was talking about was the idea of trying to focus your activities on the important but not urgent activities. And so do many other time management experts and productivity experts. But no one really defined what that was. Covey talked a little bit about relationships and so on, but they say, hey, spend time on your important but not urgent activities. What are those? So I thought, well, I think I can take a crack at this because I've done time studies for 35 years using the timecorder device. And interestingly, I have a little bit of insight where in advance of those time studies, we asked people 4 questions about productivity. The first is, what are the most important things you need to do in your job? There's that word, important. So for instance, if you talk to a sales rep and ask him that question or her, they will say things like processing orders or servicing my clients or filling out reports or whatever. But the number one thing that they will say is prospecting for new business or some alternative to that, and selling and so on. So prospecting and selling is what they are saying is the most important task in their job. So I went to 13 major job types. If you ask managers, it's managing and coaching. If you ask service people, and these are knowledge workers, it tends to be servicing customers. So those are the things that they're saying belong in that quadrant, that important but not urgent quadrant. Okay, so now what does the time data say? So let's match up what they say they're supposed to be doing with how they spend their time. So that's what I did for those 13 major jobs. And lo and behold, sales reps spend about 23% of their time doing actual selling. So that's contacting prospects or meeting them or selling to them, maybe doing some marketing to them as well. So that tends to be about 23%. And other jobs, it's a little below that. Some jobs, it's above. The average is about 20%. Now, that shouldn't be confused with people who quote the so-called Pareto principle. They talk about the 20-80 rule. It's not to be confused with that. That's never been measured either. But this has been. It just coincidentally is 20%. Interestingly, when I looked at men versus women, women are actually doing a better job. They're at about 22% of their time tends to get spent on their highest priority activities. And for men, it's only 20%. And you go, only 20%. Well, back to that sales rep as an example. They also need to be processing orders and going to sales meetings and traveling to their customers and providing service and so on and taking breaks. So if you add all that up, that's the other 80% or roughly 77. So there's only 23% or so available for selling. Now they can get that higher, and some top performers do, but the average is 20. So if you're thinking about your job, chances are your highest priority activities are going to be somewhere in that 20%. And so the opportunity is, how do I increase that up to 30 or 35%?
Are you finding that as technology keeps evolving, AI is a good example, um, that time is becoming like, for example, for this podcast, right? When we started first doing this series, I'd sit there, start reading everybody's background information, start cobbling stuff together. My expertise wasn't being a Shakespeare, so you're not going to get a soliloquy, etc. And now I'm using AI, and literally, I'll take this information, kind of come in. I have a rough draft, kind of process it to refine it so it's a more polished edition. And literally, it speeds up my process. Are you finding that in the workplace? AI is an example. It doesn't have to be AI, but are there things that people can do, tools that they can capitalize on to leverage to help expedite and stay on target on the important tasks? Meanwhile, the more mundane still get done?
Well, if I said sure, that's only an opinion. So let's look at the data. Let's look at the facts. But start that with a little story. So when I was at Procter & Gamble way back, we prepared promotion plans. We had a number of areas across the country, and we had a number of months down the year. Guess what? That looks like a spreadsheet. And so we were spending time in March in this region, in February in that region, and so on. So we prepared these plans, and we had to get the numbers to add up. We didn't have spreadsheets, so it was all done manually on a big sheet. And if you didn't get your numbers to add up, oh, I made a mistake. There was an error in one of those columns or rows. So along came Excel and Lotus before that, and whoa, we could do these things and get them to add up much better. Well, guess what? Our boss said, huh, can you do a version that shows 2% growth? And can you do another version with 5% growth and another with 10% growth? Oh, great. So we spent the same amount of time, but we did more alternatives. So I don't know if our promotion plans were any better, but they certainly had prettier looking fonts. So I started doing these time studies in 1990. There was no email, there was no internet, there were no smartphones. Heck, one big client said, there's a major technology, initiative. It was voicemail, and that's gone by the wayside for a lot of people. So I've watched all of these different technologies come along. Sometimes I wonder if we're not just inventing more and more ways to be out of touch with each other. That happens. What I found is that the amount of administrative time hasn't changed. For knowledge workers, it's somewhere around 25%. That's all the non-value added work, going to internal meetings and processing paperwork and doing your expense reports and all those sorts of things. So it was 25%. It's still 25%. Remember a couple of minutes ago, I talked about all those unnecessary emails or the different versions of doing things. There's a new one today that I've discovered. It's apps. And so I teach skiing part-time, and we had the parents fill out a little app to give permission for their kids to go on a special ski run. Well, they had to find the app from a store, download it, get an email to confirm it, set up a password, find that it went on, and you had people staring at phones for a while. So we think that technology is going to help us, and it does, but sometimes just showing up, I wanted to buy a ticket for an event recently. Just here's my 20 bucks. But no, you had to do all this motions and so on. And yes, data is better. And yes, we know about who signed up and so forth. But what we're finding is that administrative time hasn't changed. So you mentioned AI, big new revolutionary tool. As my daughter says, and she's a computer science master's, she says, Dad, when they invented spreadsheets, all the accountants didn't go out of business. It was just a tool. So indeed, AI is a nice tool. But I suspect for knowledge workers, and some of them may not be around, people who are writing things, but nonetheless, for the knowledge workers that will be around 10 years from now, I expect they will still be burdened by 25% of administrative time. The smarter ones will be up in the 35%, and they will be using those technology tools better than others. The rest of the world is going to get slowed down by all these apps that take up time and so on. So I'm okay with technology, but I recognize that it has these unintended consequences and side effects that we need to be aware of as well.
You brought up something really interesting as you're describing the app. And I believe other people refer to it as friction points, even on a website. You know, pick a major distributor here in Canada, right? You can shop from home, and they make everything. You can look at the product, etc., and then your next button, and so it's how it's displayed, but it's more. There's less friction than other sites, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I got to enter a password. Oh, now I got to add this. And it's almost like my even the software update some days. Oh, do you want that now? No, I'm trying to use you now. I can do the update after I'm done. I'll be fine with that. So is the consumption of time friction points? Is that a good way to define it then? You're
Sure,
running.
I think I'm a little bit of an expert on that. So I invented an electronic device. For those who are watching, I'm holding up the time quarter device that invented. For those who aren't, it's small. It's about 4 by 7 inches. It's sort of a large remote control, you might say, and it's got a series of letters of the alphabet. So I lend that out to employees, and they use it to track their time. I like to describe it as just a little less complicated to use than a doorbell. If you press the doorbell, it's like, "Oh, did that ring? Or did the person, did it have it work?" Whereas with the time quarter, you get audio, visual, and tactile feedback. You turn the on button on and press one button and it's working for you. That's it. Dead simple. We can teach people to use it in about 10 seconds. Now, the orientation sessions I have when we do these time studies go on a little bit longer because we have to explain the different activities and how long they're going to do it and so on. But it's dead simple to use one of these devices. So in a way, I followed that advice way back. Apple started it and created a device that's simple to use. We don't give instructions out with the device because we want people to attend these orientation sessions. But if it's dead simple to figure out, and it's got some on-screen prompts if you press some of the function buttons. I also try to keep the function buttons down to a minimum. There's 8 of them, and that's it, plus all the letters of the alphabet. So indeed, keeping ergonomics simple for any device is what's needed. And AI is not that simple. If you say, write my wife a love poem, well, you've got to give it prompts, right? Does she like cooking? Does she like tennis? And so we have to do a little bit of work to get AI working for us. I think AI does make a lot of sense. I've used it here and there to analyze some research results, to write a draft of an article, but it's just a tool. And so we humans need to use those tools wisely and not find ourselves getting too caught up in them. They'll help, but they won't go all the way.
So getting an hour back in the day, why wouldn't you want to go for all 8 hours as
Huh.
opposed to like getting the one? I just, uh, some people want to be greedy. I want to maximize my entire day, and run full bore. But it sounds like there's a bit of a balance in there that's happening. So why is 1 hour such a game changer for folks?
Well, so you quote some of my stuff where I say we can improve your time by an hour per day for your top priority activities. There's other productivity people who say, we'll double your productivity. Well, what does that mean? Double what? And so if you've measured and you're spending 20% of your time, and that might be, say, 10 hours per week or so out of a 50-hour week, might be a little less than that. And if you can get an hour extra, so if going from 10 hours to 15 hours, that would be, you're now up in the sort of 30 to 35% range. That's all that I think is possible because you're doing all those other things. You're going to those internal meetings, you're preparing reports, you're coaching your employees, and so on. So there's a limit to how much you can improve your productivity. You can delegate, and so by delegating to an admin assistant or somebody else, a contractor, then you can get more time for your top priority activities. Certainly CEOs are really focused on maximizing their time on the things that are most important. And they're higher. They're not doing administrative stuff. So they're a little bit higher. They don't tend to be part of my database. I've measured some. But in terms of middle managers and service reps and sales reps, they've got a balance of things to do. And so there's a limit to how much more of that high priority time they can get in their day.
There's a thought: if you get a good thing, it's great, but if you get too much of a good thing, it might be actually detrimental. Would that be true of time? Not that you get more time, because time's finite, right? A minute's a minute. You can't make it two
Right.
minutes out of 1 minute, right? But can you over optimize?
You certainly need to keep balance. There's got to be some other things that you need to do. So I want to spend time with my family. Sure, if it's kind of low, then you want to increase that for sure. But you also need to earn an income or, take care of the household gardening or buy groceries or whatever it might happen to be. And so you can integrate activities, you can spend your time doing with your family doing some of those things. I just recognize that there's a bunch of things that make up our lives, and they're going to be in some kind of balance. You can change that balance a little bit, but there will always be a number of different activities that you're going to be involved with. So indeed, try and take the wasteful ones and reduce them. And so at home, Maybe you're watching too much television. Maybe you're surfing the internet too much and finding yourself going, well, wow, how is that time useful to me? So you can reduce that time for sure and say, okay, how do I spend time on those top priority activities? Spending time on my job or building my business or spending time with family or learning a hobby or volunteering. Those are high priority activities for sure.
That just occurred to me. Time is unless of course you have a like your time quarter or a watch or the clock, right? You don't know exactly how long you spent on something at times. Sometimes you might be doing something and it's only a minute has actually passed, but it seems like an eternity. And other times, where did it go? How do you get perception of time tuned in to, here's a task, assuming you're not assembling components on a factory line, because you'll know the time because the timing is, what's happening around you. But if, let's say, you're working on a project and you're diving deep into it and you're deep in thought, and all of a sudden you're so engrossed that when you come up for air, you realize 2 hours has gone by. Like, what the heck? How do you help the entrepreneur, help the business understand, put boundaries around it so you don't get totally lost?
So I'm measuring how time is spent. There certainly is literature about the perception of time when time slows down. So in some emergency, or car crash or something like that, people say, "Oh man, it took minutes." Well, it was just a few seconds. On the other hand, the perception of time is speeding up often is related to something called flow. So you're deep involved with a project or studying or getting something to fixing something or a hobby. And that's when you're at your best, when things just click one after the other and time does fly by because you're in that sense of psychological flow. And that's good. That's a good thing to have happen. So those are perceptions of time, which is different from the use, the actual spending of time. And so you say, what does it matter? Well, if my sales rep is spending 2 hours more than that sales rep on unnecessary paperwork, if I can reduce that, then that does allow that sales rep to spend more time on the things that matter most, the selling and servicing of clients. So we have actual spending of time and perceptions of time that can be a little bit different.
So this involves like a return on investment, and the return on investment is like, do I feel good about it? So that, kind of an internal reward process. From a business perspective, it's then, have I increased sales? Do you find that the priorities will shift? In other words, let's say the salesperson spends that extra few minutes with the client, and that just has reaps bounds and rewards, not only for the sale now, but for future sales or future activity. Is the time then its weighted importance shift? Is it dynamic or is it always static?
In terms of that example that you mentioned, we think, oh, did I get this thing done really fast? Did I fill out this paperwork really quickly? That would be good. Whereas the example you just gave, spending time with a prospect or perhaps a client, sometimes more time is good. You don't want to rush your way through that because you want to understand the needs of the prospect thoroughly, because you want to pick up extra information and so on. So in those cases, longer, more time spent makes sense rather than shorter time filling out a paperwork or something. From an organizational perspective, I've recently come to a new and perhaps slightly disappointing conclusion that companies don't care, and they should. And so, first, they don't care because employees are prepared to put in more time than they've contracted for. If you look at most of these knowledge work jobs, they're supposed to work around 42 and a half hours per week and you take off lunch and so on. But if employees end up spending 46 hours, which is what my data is saying, or they're working really long, crazy hours, and some of them are getting up into the 50 or 55 range or even more, that's free time that the company's getting that they don't have to pay for. And so, from a corporate perspective, everybody working these long, crazy hours makes sense, except then the problem is you get burnout, there's turnover, you get decreasing quality of work, and people are working late hours and not getting sleep and so on. So companies should care a little bit more or a lot more to help their employees. But a lot of them say, well, I'm getting all this free labor. So that's why there's not one of my company's franchises in every corner, is because often organizations don't care a whole lot. And it's interesting because they don't care to train people either. And I do a lot of training work. We kind of assume that people know how to sell or how to write emails or how to communicate or how to coach employees, but they don't always. And so the investment in those soft skills makes a lot of sense. And those tend to get ignored sometimes. So my call out to large organizations would be invest the time in understanding your employees, in training them better, and in understanding where their time is being spent, because then you can rejig that and get them on their top priority activities and reduce absenteeism, turnover, wasted time, and improve work-life balance. And there's different measures of that as well.
So if you're a manager and you want to help your staff succeed and absorb the information you're going to be talking about, or that we're sorry, let me rephrase that. Edit. If you are a manager and you're trying to maximize the yield in a good way, micromanaging, obviously, I'm going to suspect, is the wrong way to go. How do you train up your staff to realize, but at the same time, you have to shepherd them through a little bit till they get it? How does that structure look? How does that play out?
First, you've got to devote the time to do that. And one of my favorite tips for people dealing with daily to-do lists, I say, okay, what are your long-term goals? The manager has certain goals he or she wants to achieve in terms of strategic plans and so forth. It might be sales, it might be customer service standards, it might be introducing new products, it might be launching a new software system. Whatever those goals are, those tend to be long-term. And people are overwhelmed with everything they're doing today. So I say to them, start with a blank to-do list. There's nothing on it at all. And then ask yourself, if I had nothing to do today, what would I do to affect my results a month from now? Oh, I would hire that new employee, or I'd launch that sales campaign, or I'd work on that product launch and so on. So if you had nothing to do today, what would you do to affect your results a month from now? Those are your top priority activities. And that's what you got to devote time towards. So back to your question about helping along your staff. First, it's making time for that stuff. What tends to happen with a lot of managers is they're conduits of information. They're sending information down to their staff, and they're taking those reports and sending them up to senior management. Those are administrative activities, and they need to be done. But coaching, managing, and directing your employees is why you're a manager. So devote some time to that, and then learn about some leadership skills so that you can direct people well. And there's tons of information about how to do that. It's about being clear with the employee about what their goals are. It's about providing them with the right resources. It's about coaching them along and making them accountable. You need to spend some time on those activities. And once you do, then those employees will deliver. But if you say, well, she doesn't have time and I don't have time, we just got to get back to what we're doing, then you've wasted that opportunity to do the things that managers should be doing, which is coaching, managing, and directing and supervising their employees. You've got to devote some time for that. Whatever that is, it's going to be at least 20% of your time. And set that time aside and say, hey, let's meet on Friday morning and let's spend a half an hour on this, on your development and on this project. Set some time aside for that, and then the rest should follow.
Time usually is a for some people it can be pressing. And in fact, if it always feels that you're running red hot, running hard and continuous, you're working overtime, etc., that can lead to some negative consequences for the person themselves. Whether you own the business or, like, some people are workaholics. Other people, they just, they give it, and then all of a sudden, they come home at the end of the week, or they take a holiday, and it's like, uh, it's a pressure relief valve. What have you found out about burnout and overwork from your studies?
I tend to measure the people who are there, who are employed and who are working. I'm not measuring all the people who have left. Certainly, the literature is full of it. And back in the 1980s, we talked a lot about stress management. I'm seeing hints and trends that stress is reemerging again, uh, possibly because people aren't being given that proper direction, because they're running off in all sorts of different directions and ways and doing this and that, so on, because the other departments are being inefficient back to them. So there is this sense of stress out there, compounded by the fact that work has changed. Am I working from home, or am I at the office? At home, I've got kids running around and my spouse is there. I've got a tiny little office in the dining room, or space in the dining room. So that's caused some grief for people. The idea was, hey, we can all work from home now. Indeed, we're saving some commuting time. So there's that. But that's about it, really, in terms of the resources you've got available and the tasks you're doing in your job. If saving commuting time is huge, then sure, you can be more productive because you've saved a couple of hours per day. But as I said, if you've got kids running around and pets and spouse and so on and distractions, and you're missing out on some of the elements of synergy that work so well in an office, being able to have meetings in person and be able to read body language, managers being able to walk around, being able to talk to people and have confidential development meetings face to face rather than over Zoom or Teams. So I did measure that and found out that ideally knowledge workers would want to be together for at least 10 hours per week. And that's about a day and a half. So equivalent of really 2 days, because nobody comes in to work for half a day. So it's going to be at least 2 days. Many of my colleagues out there were predicting all kinds of trends about the future. I tended to stay away from that. Interestingly, what we are seeing is a move towards increasing the number of days in the office rather than decreasing. The good news is when your child is sick, that you can work from home, or you've got a contractor coming or a doctor's appointment or something. So we've allowed everybody that opportunity to work away from the office. Nonetheless, we're seeing those trends to moving more towards in-office work. I don't plan to make any predictions. I'm measuring the work wherever it's getting done. And there were a lot of nasty software systems that were measuring people. And often people said, well, it doesn't really matter how much time you spend working. Well, sure, we're interested in getting results. I'm interested in time as a diagnostic tool. If you're spending 3 hours per week filling out redundant paperwork, that's worth understanding and measuring so we can reduce that paperwork or delegate it or give it away or automate it or whatever.
Interesting. From a cultural perspective, is there any particular culture or part of the world that gets this really well?
Hmm. I've done these time studies in about 40 different countries, and they tend to be sort of advanced industrial societies. There are other colleagues who do time use research, and they've done, you know, agrarian societies or third world countries and so on, and they've looked at time spent there, where people's primary activity is food gathering and preparation and so on. They tend to spend more time with their families. But to answer that broadly, I think in industrialized Western countries, we're seeing similar trends in most countries. There's some literature about France and some of the Romance countries taking afternoons off and so on. I don't have as much on that. France experimented with a shorter work week a while back, but that was mandated by the government. And I think basically people don't want to be mandated. They want to decide for themselves what those work hours are going to be.
Yeah.
In Canada, there were some laws about email after hours, and that's all kind of vague. Companies had to sort of allow people to know that they could work emails after hours. It's all a bit vague. So I don't think it's for governments to mandate those things. And what we end up with is most companies and organizations are somewhat similar over the broad terms.
If you had advice to give to a startup business, an entrepreneur just ramping up, how would you have them structure? And what are like three key points that you want to say? Structure yourself this way. This is a good start.
I would say first figure out what you're really good at. What is your added value? A quick little story. Decades ago, I thought I was going to run car rallies part-time, and we did a couple. And I used to be a disc jockey at the time, so we rented this place and we had to buy all the meals. And I was the disc jockey. We're going to have dancing afterwards. Well, the lesson I learned from that is first, we didn't need to buy the meals or figure that out in advance. Just show up at a bar and let them sell the meals. And we didn't make a markup on that, but we didn't have to reserve them all. And in terms of the music, I didn't have to be the disc jockey. Let the bar do that, or wherever we ended up. So I figured out what do I need to be really good at was planning and running the car rally, which I don't do anymore, but it was a great lesson at the time. So similarly in your business, what are you best at doing? Then delegate the rest. Look, I invented an electronic device. I don't know how to program electronic chips, and I don't know how to design the intricate details of how circuit boards work, but I was able to hire people to do that. So that's what I would say is figure out what you're doing, what you can do best. The second piece of advice I would say is figure out what your marketing machine is. How are you going to, your client acquisition machine? How are you going to get customers? Is it by advertising or word of mouth or putting up posters in the coffee shop or whatever you do? Figure out that marketing. You're going to need to spend some time on marketing. And the third advice would be build a team. Again, some of those people are people you don't that have other expertise than you, but maybe you've got a team of advisors as well. Don't think you're doing it all alone. And then focus your time on what really matters most.
So, Mark, to help wrap us up and for our audience, do you have any books, any podcasts, and how do we reach you? And
So
where do you reach? How far? I heard 40 countries. I think at one point in time there in the
yes,
conversation.
well, I like to keep it simple. I got 5 different websites, but getmoredone.com, just like it sounds. You can reach me through that. I'm Mark Ellwoood, and there's a contact form there. There are articles there and research reports, so you can see those. If you want to receive no charge at all, an article on putting a priority on your time with some terrific time management tips, just write me. There's no obligation, no workshops, seminars I'm pitching. I'm happy to help people out. And even if you want a bit of coaching time, I'm not a coach. It's not the major part of my business, but I'm happy to spend a little bit of time with people who have some good questions. It's what I do as a sort of a volunteer. So getmoredone.com, reach me through that, and happy to help, no obligation.
Mark Ellwoood, I want to say thank you so much. Really, really good conversation today. My co-host Wayne Pratt for his continuous support, but more importantly, you, the Knack for Business listeners, because this hopefully fills a void into your space. Because Mark's tracked, he's proved the system, was shocked by what he found when he applied it to himself, and let him bring you that same worthiness, that same insight into your workday, into your time, and maybe get more family time out of it, so you have a balanced life. I'd like to acknowledge the following folks for their support. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who's the Property Wizard podcaster, where I'm a co-host. Jovan Stryker from AdHive, a co-working space that's more than just a space. Melanie Weber, my invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves both as a coach and a host to these podcasts. To reach us, it's info@creativeinsight.com, and the website is creativeinsight.com. And to reach Wayne Pratt, he's at wayne@motivateyou.ca, and that's the word motive, then the number 8, and the letter u.ca. And his website is motivateyou.ca.